Hey everyone, Lou here. Now, for those new here, I did a video a while back about Cardcaptor Sakura versus Sailor Moon. On that video, a user named MelodyBunny11 commented a video about Death Note versus Code Geass. That idea was such an amazing one that I decided to do it. Roll the intro and let's get started on the comparison. For those who don't know either anime, Death Note was a manga made by Oba Sugumi with the art drawn by Takeshi Obata in December 2003 to pretty massive critical acclaim. It was also groundbreaking as a weekly Shonen Jump manga, as it's one of the very few manga that wasn't about people punching each other. There were battles alright, but mind battles, which was a refreshing change to fans of Weekly Shonen Jump. Though Weekly Shonen Jump is a very stubborn publishing company, so I can't say it really changed the infrastructure of their strict scheduling and creative control, rather opened for more creative stories which would eventually lead to the publication of later manga like Dr. Stone and The Promised Neverland. An adaptation of the Death Note manga released in October 2006 by Studio Madhouse, who are known for literally never making a second season to anything, and critically acclaimed anime like Hellsing Ultimate, Death Parade, Perfect Blue, Season 1 of One Punch Man, and No Game, No Life. While Code Geass, or Code Geass Lelouch of the Rebellion, is an anime original by Studio Sunrise, who are known for some pretty well-received anime such as Inuyasha, Cowboy Bebop, and Gintama. The series was created by Goro Taniguchi, who went on to make the incredibly disappointing Skate Leading Stars, so this is pretty much his magnum opus. Character design and art style was done by the all-female manga team Clamp, who created a number of beloved shoujo works like Cardcaptor Sakura and Chobits. The anime released in October 2006 as well, so I'd like to think that maybe some people drew some similarities with each of them for sure, though I don't really notice anyone drawing similarities, which is weird to me because they're actually pretty similar on paper, though we'll get to that. Keep in mind though that I am comparing solely the anime from 2006 for both of them. I haven't seen and don't care for the Code Geass movies, and although I like the Death Note one-shot from last year, both pieces should be viewed as standalone for this video. Also spoilers for both of them, obviously, along with the gameplay here because anime copyright with Code Geass sucks ass, but I'll try to put as many clips as I can. Alright, with the backstory out of the way, let's get started. Death Note is about Light Yagami, the son of the chief of police in Japan, who finds a random notebook that fell from the sky. This book is called the Death Note, and it's a notebook where if you write the person's name, they would die. Granted, there are rules, I think like 14, but I could be wrong on that. The main rules of the Death Note is that you need to know the person's real name and face. If you don't write a cause of death within 40 seconds, they'll die of a heart attack. If you write the cause of death, then you need to write it within 6 minutes, and you can't write anyone under the age of 2 in the Death Note. After writing the name of a criminal who kidnapped a bunch of school children and teacher, Light Yagami realizes that he can use this Death Note to kill criminals, and decides he'll become a god to create a world without any crime and filled with only people he deems good. Though this is not an easy feat for Light, as the world's greatest anonymous detective L is investigating once people start to realize all the criminals are dying of heart attacks that seems to be the work of some sort of serial killer, and starts a brilliant mind game of cat and mouse with L. Including is Misa Amane, who has Shinigami eyes. This means she traded half her life for the eyes of a Shinigami where she can see the real name of anyone along with the date they are going to die. She also has a Death Note, by the way. She's basically an unfunny, annoying, and unsympathetic version of Harley Quinn, to be honest. Anyway, now obviously Light is not a good person. It basically shows us what happens when you give a narcissistic privileged genius with a god complex that kind of power, not to mention shining a light on the justice system of Japan. To me, this is a very complex question to answer, but I personally disagree with Light's actions. I'm not going to go too far into it due to the point of Death Note being a massive debate piece, but Light would often kill petty criminals who clearly did not deserve death, like those awaiting trial or those who did not have all the evidence gathered yet, or even purse snatchers. Japan actually has a pretty high conviction rate, but not due to Japan being the world's greatest crime scene analysis or investigators, rather because the Japanese court system is biased and often does not take a neutral approach the way a court system should be. Then again, I guess you could argue most court systems are like that, but the point still stands that the Japanese conviction rate is very high for this reason at 99%. If we assume that Light is basically an example of the Japanese justice system's brutality in petty crime, then it's great. Light is also a horrifying and fascinating character to watch in and of itself. Light may be a terrible human being, but also fascinating in seeing the extent of his shittiness. It's basically watching the mind of every abusive sociopath try to avoid real justice and consequences, and damn, is that fascinating. I can easily say that Death Note inspired my love for character study in the first place. The entire series is basically one big social commentary and character study. Though many people apparently hate the second half of Death Note, I actually quite liked it, though I can admit it is a bit rushed. I'd say this is an anime issue, but the manga was like that too, so I'm just going to blame Shonen Jump for that, considering Shonen Jump just loves to rush the endings for any manga that tries to deviate from the norm. Another flaw in Death Note's story is that the female characters are all pretty bad. I don't mean as in evil, I mean as in poorly written. The only female character who is not killed off, easily manipulated, or is deemed too weak to be seen again is Hal Lidner. Though considering this entire series is told from mostly Light's perspective, perhaps the reason most of the female cast is awful is because Light's sexist and views women in that way. I mean, Light is a shitty narcissist, it wouldn't surprise me if he was sexist. Overall, Death Note's story is great, but it's also not a perfect series. From a slightly rushed ending due to poor treatment of characters for the opposite gender, the series is still amazing even with these flaws taken into account. Next is Code Geass. Code Geass' story takes place about 10 years after a major war. In this universe, England expanded massively and began taking over several countries. They pretty much took over the whole world with the exception of China, Russia, Australia, and some South African nations. When England, or the Britannian Empire as it renamed itself, took over most of the world, they stripped the countries of their names and called them by areas instead. Japan would be stripped of its name and called Area 11, with Japanese citizens called 11s and now face major racism due to the fact that Japan didn't fight back. Allegedly. Japanese citizens were also forced to live in the slums, while Britannians were allowed to tear down people's homes and build schools with more European-inspired buildings. Honestly, the backstory alone is pretty serious and intense. This is the kind of serious shit you'd hear about on The Handmaid's Tale or something like that. Anyway, our protagonist is Lelouch Lamperouge, a typical Britannian teenager living in Area 11 with several other high-class children like himself. He has a sister named Nanali who's blind and physically handicapped, and a friend named Suzaku. After running late for school and a resistance trying to fight back against the Britannian Empire, Lelouch meets a girl in green. This girl was presumably shot, but her voice speaks to Lelouch when he is surrounded by a group of Britannian soldiers who are after her. In an attempt to get out of this situation, Lelouch makes a deal with her where she grants him the power of something called Geass. Every Geass is different, but his ability is to control the mind through eye contact. He orders all of the soldiers to kill themselves and saves his ass. The mysterious dead girl? She shows up a few days later and says her name is C2. C2 is an immortal witch, and she's now in a contract with Lelouch. While this happens, we also find out that Lelouch is actually Lelouch V. Britannia, one of the many children to the King of Britannia. The King of Britannia has a fuck ton of children, so I honestly have no clue where Lelouch is on the line of succession, but he's somewhere there, along with his sister. You see, Lelouch's mother was assassinated right in front of him, and his sister was nearly killed in his mother's arms, which left her blind and physically disabled. Yet his father never investigated his mother's death. The King of Britannia has a fuck ton of wives because of reasons, so the death of Lelouch's mother didn't bother him in the slightest. This left him enraged, and he bursts out in front of his father. His father was angry that Lelouch dared to talk back to him, so he sent him nominally to Area 11 to live with the son of the Japanese Prime Minister of Japan, Suzaku. Angry at his father and Britannia taking over the country of his friend, Lelouch vows to destroy the Britannian Empire someday. Now that he has that power, Lelouch uses his brilliant mind and newfound powers to do just that, destroy the Britannian Empire. Taking on the persona of Zero and using his incredible tactics with the resistance of Japan, he'd soon rise a rebellion while his powers grow stronger. Like Death Note, the series involves a game of cat and mouse with the Britannian Empire and Lelouch. Except the difference between Light and Lelouch is very big here. Light has a god complex and is overall a maniacal character who could have easily been the villain had the perspective switched in the story. Lelouch does shitty things, but he doesn't have a god complex, and every awful decision he makes is because taking down an entire nation has its casualties. Though Lelouch is not a good person entirely. Technically, his desire to take down the Britannian Empire and restore Japan is not totally because of Suzaku, at least not anymore, but revenge for his mother. Though both Light and Lelouch are extremely complicated characters. Lelouch also does shitty things on purpose too. He wanted the world to view him as a monster, so the last of the tainted views of the Britannian family would die with him, leaving Nonali and a few other siblings alive by the end of it. Lelouch dies because he knows his sister is not power-hungry, corrupted, or selfish like he is. He knows he can't be king because he doesn't deserve it, technically speaking. Light dies because of a fatal mistake and Ryuk's boredom over him. The other major difference here is theming. Death Note is a social commentary about the justice system, what happens when you put a narcissistic sociopath in power, and what is considered true justice in the world. While Code Geass' themes are racism, why monarchies are just a bad idea, what power does to a person, and the complexities of rebellion. There are also minor themes of drug addiction, terrorism, and abusive relationships, though these are technically minor only because there are a lot of themes jumbled into this pot, so the show has to focus on the main ones mostly. There are also a lot more characters who do things in Code Geass than in Death Note. No offense to Matsuda or Mello, but the main and central characters of Death Note are Light and L. Even when L is dead, the focus is still on L and the legacy he purposefully left behind to ensure that Light would be caught. Yet in Code Geass, there's a lot of characters doing a lot of things that affect Lelouch and his plans. From victims of his Geass ability slowly conspiring to find out why they don't remember the things they did, Lelouch's sister, Euphemia trying to give Japan back to its people before dying horribly, and Suzaku's emotional turmoil. That's another thing, by the way, the character of Suzaku who struggles deeply with conflict. It's a lot of conflict, but the main one being a blind sense of loyalty and a very naive sense of chivalry to a point where many people from his clan blame him for the fall of Japan. You see, Suzaku killed his father as a child in order to prevent his father from escalating the war with Britannia because he believes it would lead to less casualties. Well, considering the entire damn plot, I'd say great job there, Suzaku. Just kidding though, I really do love his character and his conflict. One thing I want to bring up in Code Geass is that the series also heavily references the legends of King Arthur and works by William Shakespeare. Literary nerds like myself will probably get what I'm talking about, but I'll let you guys figure some of it out. Though Code Geass has its flaws, there is fan service specifically with the characters Colin and C2, which kinda cheapens the series with a lot of really interesting themes when you see Colin in the damn Playboy bunny suit. The character Nina in general, I think her character is overwhelmingly racist, killing hundreds of people, and that thing she did with the classroom table is all I need to say on why she's garbage. There is some weird pacing between the school antics and Lelouch's plans to change the world. In the first season, it balances out school activities so Lelouch can blend in and his Zero stuff pretty well. But in the second season, it kind of flip-flops around where some school scenes and episodes felt really out of place. The characters Tianzi and Shinkei also have a tendency to give off red flags of a pedo relationship to some people. I didn't personally see it that way. Frankly, I thought Shinkei just cared about her like an older brother or father figure, and maybe Tianzi had a crush because that's just what preteens do. Though this is Clamp we're talking about, so I wouldn't be surprised. Some have said there is implied incest between Nanali and Lelouch. Personally, I don't see that at all, but I've heard some people say that, so I think it's only right I say it here in case there are people who agree with that, but personally, I don't understand what they're talking about at all. As for similarities, obviously the plot of a teenager growing up and using supernatural powers to change the world around him, all the while playing a game of cat and mouse. Overall, both series are incredible, and honestly, I really struggle to pick which one has the better story. Each has their own strengths and weaknesses, so honestly, I think it's a tie for writing and story here. The animation for Death Note is very interesting. Obviously, it's not realistic because duh, it's anime, but I think it has a realism feel to it. Does that make sense? All characters have very grounded and realistic designs. I think the only exception is Nier, though that could be his albinism, so it's possible? The designs for the Shinigami, though, are fucking fantastic. I know some people kind of complain the Shinigami are extremely inconsistent, but I'm not really sure why that's something to complain about when they're the embodiment of death, therefore death doesn't really have a face, but I personally love it. Ryuk, of course, being the best design. I don't know why, but I do get major Tim Burton vibes when I see Ryuk. Maybe it's the twisted grin, long limbs, and spiky hair. I don't really know, but I just love it. Then there's also that human Ryuk design that the character designer of Death Note drew, which does things to me. Though the color palette for the Death Note anime is a little flat, there's a lot of grays in the series, though this is likely done intentionally as Light and L's monologues are done with colored tones to be like a dramatic JoJo shot. Unlike most anime where I give it negatives for having a boring color palette, I'm not going to fault Death Note for it, because the idea of Death Note is to have a sense of realism to it, so the realistic colors is not a bad idea and it fits the tone of the series very well. Though I did notice the animation quality dips around the time Light and Misa are in solitary confinement and when L and Light are handcuffed to each other, though the quality picks back up after this. The art style also stayed very consistent. I didn't notice multiple storyboarders with vastly different art styles in this anime, like with some shows from this era of time. Let's not also forget the nailing of Light's manic side slipping in for those facial expressions. To this day, the shot of Light laughing like a lunatic and that Kira confession is just incredible. Though for Code Geass, well, the color palette is pretty nice. Purple and red seem to be a strong color theme in terms of character design and focus points, and the colors are a lot brighter. Instead of grays and browns, we do get a pleasing cream and sky blue colors blending into the background and characters. Though style, not my favorite. What's weird is that I love Clamp's style, but the style here in Code Geass is odd. The limbs are heavily exaggerated in this art style for the sole purpose of dynamic shots. While it does work, there are some awesome scenes of Lelouch with some awesome dynamic shots, but the other times it kind of looks awkward, like extremely awkward, and sometimes makes the animation look like Sailor Moon Crystal Season 1 and 2 levels of bad. Though the facial expressions really go all out in the second season, really dynamic, and you can really see the intensity of their emotions on their faces, which is awesome because I love dynamic facial expressions, but that's the only other positive I can really say. Overall, both have good themes, but I have to say that Death Note wins here. While the other color palette is dull, it works to the series' advantage as a show with some semi-realism to it, and there's pops of color in character monologue scenes to really intensify the moment, so that's pretty good. Despite Lelouch and Light having their similarities of teenagers obtaining powers too big for them, the themes here are extremely different. Death Note focuses on themes of justice, narcissism, death, and morality. The entire show is basically making you really sit down and question a lot of things in our everyday lives, really. What is real justice and what is truly considered good morals? As I said, I don't personally agree with Light, but the point of the series is to question whether or not Light's idea is right or wrong, but obviously disagree with the whole God thing, because it's just no. Death is also a heavy theme here, not necessarily where you'll end up when you die, as the creator confirmed there is no heaven or hell in Death Note's universe, rather how death affects us. It's all really fascinating themes, actually. While Code Geass has themes of rebellion, racism, chivalry, and also shares the same theme of morality. Instead of Death Note's morality theme, where we question whether or not it's a good idea to give what's basically the death penalty to all criminals, it's morality over how many lives are appropriate to sacrifice for the sake of a good goal. Racism is also a heavy theme within Code Geass. Japanese characters face heavy racial discrimination and definitely some real-world parallels. For instance, children born of Britannian and Japanese families are heavily discriminated and will often go by their Britannian parents' name to hide the fact that they are Japanese. They are also never referred to as Japanese aside from the Britannian Empire when talking about ways to further suppress them. Common citizens will legit refer to them as 11s. It also seems there is a bit of segregation in the upper class areas of Japan where Japanese students do not attend schools with Britannians unless they are secretly half Japanese or high-ranking in the military like Suzaku. Chivalry is also a major theme here, as Suzaku is basically the embodiment of textbook naive chivalry, but it comes to question whether or not chivalry is something to go by your own moral code or the moral code of whoever has the loudest voice in the room. Morality, as I said, is different from Death Note. This time it's the age-old question of how many lives are worth it to save more lives. We see this in particular where Nina installed a bomb that blew up a district in Japan, which Lelouch technically egged on the detonation because he knew that a catastrophe like that would benefit for the uprising. Yet all the while, Lelouch does feel guilty and even feels a little sick about it, so it's a balance there. Then there's also the theme of rebellion, which is a pretty obvious plot. Both have excellent themes, so there's really neither one that comes out on top. They both offer really interesting questions, and I'm sure we've all questioned them within us time and time again. Just like in the story, it's equal here. Both are equally enjoyable in their own way. Both series have their strengths and weaknesses, but honestly, I can't say which one is better than the other. Maybe if you had a Death Note and told me you were gonna write my name if I didn't give an answer, I'd say Death Note. Though that choice is solely because I'm a major true crime fan and Death Note ticks all the boxes that watching true crime documentaries do on YouTube or some other streaming site. Oh yeah, both Death Note and Code Geass have English dubs. The English dub for Death Note is very unique in that a few of the actors for the dub had never done English dubs prior. Specifically L's voice actor, who is primarily a television actor, so that's really interesting. There's also a really cool documentary here on YouTube that I saw a while ago talking about the dub production for Death Note, so that was actually really interesting to see. Specifically Ryuk's voice actor, who actually ate an apple in scenes where Ryuk was. Though despite most of the dub cast being very new to voice acting at the time, the acting is incredible. Specifically Light, you can't tell me you still don't get chills when he does that maniacal laugh. Like, to this day, that scene with Light was fucking amazing.
That's right. I am Kira.
The Code Geass dub, on the other hand, was done like a traditional English dub with professional voice actors, though all the voice actors here are basically a star-studded cast, including Johnny Young Bosch, Yuri Lowenthal, Laura Bailey, Crispin Freeman, Troy Baker, and so many more. Seriously, the amount of famous voice actors in Code Geass is insane. The Code Geass dub is actually pretty good too. Everyone's voices fit incredibly well for their characters. The only voice I didn't care for was Nanali's, but that's because I just hear Sui Seiseki when Nanali speaks, as they share the same voice actor. If you want to watch both dubs or subs, both anime are available on Netflix and Hulu. The quality on Netflix is actually pretty decent for Death Note. Then again, I'm saying this as someone who first watched the series in 480p on YouTube. Overall, both Code Geass and Death Note are amazing. If you love one, I guarantee you will love the other. That's it for this video. If you want to see another anime versus video like this, let me know down below. Hey guys, thanks for watching! If you liked the video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing if you're new! And if any older new subs would like to help support the channel in any possible way, my Ko-fi page is down below in the description along with all of my social media. For any subscribers, new or old, who would like to help with video ideas or maybe just want to talk about anime or something, then I have a fan server linked down below. See you next time!